Thank you, Joram Paul Songo. Today we are discussing the supplementary. Last week, members of parliament rejected the supplementary of the 2.33 trillion shillings on the basis that some of the items that were prioritized by government shouldn't have come in the supplementary. I'm joined by Honorable Gafabusa Richard, and he's going to talk about the supplementary and what should be in the supplementary. Honorable Gafabusa, you're welcome to this.
Thank you.
Honorable, what should government prioritize in a supplementary, and why did you reject the supplementary last week?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, a supplementary budget is a legal requirement. It is provided for in our appropriation and budgeting process. Supplementary means that at the time we completed our appropriation process, there are some other items, some other expenditures government along the way found necessary that would want to spend on resources. And because they are not covered under the budget that we passed as a parliament, and yet those are required for the peace and development of the country, then the executive brings them up and they form part of a supplementary budget. And supplementary is not only at the government level. I think even at the family level, you can have your supplementary budget. Things that you did not think of or were not at that time an issue, a priority, so they come. However, they do not come from the blue. The law, especially the Public Finance Management Act, which manages most of these processes, provides for it clearly. And in section 25, I think 6 of the Public Finance Management Act, it clearly stipulates what qualifies an item, what qualifies an expenditure to be acceptable as a part of a supplementary expenditure. However, because appropriation and approval of budget is done legally by Parliament, as provided for in the Constitution, but the implementation of that budget is done by the Executive. So because there are those expenditures that may be very urgent and very important to the country, and therefore, in case Parliament is not available to approve, the law provided for at least 3% of the total approved budget that the executive can go ahead and spend within the 3% and then come back to Parliament for approval. Now, I think that is where the problem is. However, within the law, there are detailed description of what qualifies to be spent on within the 3% of the total budget. And the criteria is at 3 levels. And that is under section 25, 6, and 7 of the Public Finance Management Act. Number 1, that this expenditure at the time of the approval of the national budget, this expenditure should have been unforeseeable. That at the time we approved the budget, this was not, it was not foreseen that it was required and it was important. And in the course of the implementation of the budget, if the executive finds it necessary and very important and critical, because it was not foreseen, then that is qualification number 1. Qualification number 2 is that this expenditure that is going to be covered under the 3% by the executive must be and accommodate. It is not, you will not be able to accommodate it through virement, because remember the law also provides for virement, that you can move money from one expenditure item to another within a range of 10%. That if this expenditure cannot be accommodated through virement of 10%, then that qualifies to come in supplementary budget. Then the other one is that this expenditure probably is unavoidable. Unavoidable means that for between now and the next budget, you cannot postpone it. It is very urgent that you cannot postpone it and plan for it in the next budget. Now, that is where the stalemate is. Members of Parliament are saying some of the expenditure items in this supplementary budget do not meet those criteria that we set out in the Public Finance Management Act. That some of the budget, the expenditure items are items that were brought to Parliament during the budgeting process, and Parliament objected to them, disagreed, and they were not approved. And then executive goes behind and brings them in the 3% of the supplementary that they spent on. However, I also want to note that Parliament has not rejected the entire supplementary budget, because there are those items that we think must be approved, including issues to do with wage shortfalls, especially for scientists. So it's not true that we rejected the whole budget, but there are specific expenditure items that we are not agreeing to because they are not meeting the criteria of what should be spent on in a supplementary budget under the 3%.
Honorable, I understand the supplementary is coming back today. It is coming back today and it is to be debated. Last week, the honorable members didn't even give the speaker a chance to get to stage 2 for the entire House committee. Do you think today it is going to be different from last week?
Yeah, I think today it will be different. You see, there are two ways that it is managed, and that is what the speaker yesterday asked. How do we proceed? What the members rejected was to approve the entire supplementary budget wholesome, including those items members are not comfortable with. But yesterday the speaker sought a opinion from the members, and we agreed yesterday that what we need to do is to go item by item, so that the item that the members agree is really necessary and fits the criteria of a supplementary budget, we approve. And that item that we don't agree with, we don't approve. So I think today it will be different, because I think if we go item by item, that will be good. Because it is also not proper for us as a Parliament to completely throw out the entire supplementary request, because our role as members of Parliament to appropriate, we must fulfill it. Some of the items are very important, and we really must, because if there are teachers who are not getting their salary, or some other civil servants, and we need to pay, we cannot push them until the next budget. So we must approve a supplementary so that they get their payment, and some other items. So item by item will make the difference.
Honorable, the 3%, I understand there's a section in the Public Finance Management Act that gives government a mandate to spend that money, the 3% money. Last week, the Deputy Speaker talked about amending this section so that in future, government, Parliament can approve the money that government disperses to some of the...
Oh yes, there have been so many voices, including the Deputy Speaker. You know, we find ourselves in a fix that even some of these expenditure items we are not agreeing with, Cabinet has already spent that money. So the question is, if you refuse to approve, so what happens? Because the money is already spent. And that is where we find ourselves in a fix and say maybe we need to amend the Public Finance Management Act and provide for what happens. You know, the whole thing is that, by the way, it has never happened. It has never happened that the government executive brings a supplementary budget and it's not approved, even when they have already spent. But what happens if Parliament does not approve? That is silent in the law. But in my view, there is really no need for amendment, in my view, because what is happening is that there is no gap in the law. The Public Finance Management Act is very, very detailed and very specific. What is happening, in my view, is that the executive is simply abusing the law, interpreting the law to whatever they want to do. Because, like I told you, if you subjected each expenditure item, before you spend, if you subjected each item to the criteria, the 3 levels that I explained, is this expenditure unavoidable? Is this expenditure, was it unforeseeable at the time of budgeting? Is this expenditure, and can't you accommodate it through virement? If you subject your supplementary expenditure proposals to that criteria, then the law really covers it very well. You don't need any amendment. The only gap where I think we need an amendment, now that it is beginning to happen, because for now, if Parliament goes ahead to reject approving some of these expenditure items in the supplementary, and the money has already been spent, now that is where the law is silent. What happens? For now, it is just counted as a loss. But you see, any loss to public resources, that means the person responsible, especially the accounting officer, must be held responsible. But the current provisions of the Public Finance Management Act, maybe the Constitution says something, but I think that is an area that we need probably to amend so that we tighten it, so that before the executive spends this money under the 3%, then you know that it has gone through that criteria and you are sure Parliament will not raise all these questions. And if they refuse to approve, then you take responsibility as the accounting officer. I think that is where the law is silent, and we need to make some amendment and tighten it.
Honorable, briefly as we are winding up, you are against the giving money to Atiak company, giving money to Kira Motors, giving money to Abubakar company. Those are some of the companies that members are so against giving money to.
You see, personally, I am not against giving money to Atiak, money to Kira Motors, money, all those Abubakar and the rest. I am not against, and the Speaker Resort Conference Center. I am not against, and I don't think there is any member of Parliament who is against. The issue is, before we invest, before we put money anywhere, these are public resources. There are processes we have to go through. All these companies you are talking about, members of Parliament have done oversight on them. There are parliamentary committee reports in reference to each one of them. There are recommendations Parliament has made, and the executive has not responded. So it's not really that Parliament is against, members of Parliament are against, but the process. For example, if the executive brought budget proposals for whatever investment in Atiak, and it was brought to the Committee of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, and the Committee of Trade had reservations for that expenditure and gave reasons and made recommendations, okay, during the normal budgeting process. And the budget was passed without money going to Atiaka. Then shortly, the executive turns around to bring the same proposals now under a supplementary and goes ahead to spend money without responding to those issues raised by members of parliament. That is where the problem is. The money we are spending in Munyonyo, no member of parliament is against it. But the members of parliament raised issues. We are partnering with the ownership of Munyonyo. How is our equity there? How is our shareholding there? And all those details. The executive has not come back to parliament and say, look, these are the issues you raised, these were your recommendations, and these are our action taken in regard to those issues. So those are the issues that members are raising and saying, look, the executive is twisting parliament where we are raising issues and we are saying, no, wait, until these areas are cleared, don't put money here. Executive goes ahead, hiding under the 3% and spend money, and then they want you to come. The reasons we refuse to approve money in those areas are the same reasons we still have, and now you want us to approve them in a supplementary when you have already spent. I think that is where nobody is against all these investments. But you see, you invest with the president normally says with the chibaro. You don't just throw money anywhere. You must look at the return on investment and the safety of the public funds there.
Thank you so much, Honorable Richard Gafabusa. Members of Parliament want the supplementary to prioritize the unavoidable items. Thank you so much.